Besides being on oxygen for all the time, you're 5 miles up. You know, you're 30,000 feet in the air, and it's 65 degrees below zero. But everybody was well trained. They knew their positions. They knew what they had to do. Dad grew up in Mount Angel, Oregon. He enlisted in the military in May of '42. He was a bombardier and a navigator, two separate schools. And then he shipped out over to England to a base at Hampstead, which is just north of London. A bomb group consisted of 4 squadrons of heavy bombers, and there was 12 aircraft per squadron. Dad was in the 398th Bomb Group, which was Squadron 600, 601, 602, 603. Nobody knew where they were going until just before they headed out in the morning. So they'd get early 30, then they'd take the cover off the map and show them where they were going to go. The most valuable targets were manufactured ball bearings, petroleum, rail yards. Those type of targets were also heavily defended with flak and fighters. They would fly towards the target, whichever that may be, and as they got closer, the fighters would come up and try and shoot them up. Then the fighters dropped off before they went into the flak. Flak was this 88 millimeter, thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds they'd have to fly through like a wall. And then when they come out the other side, the fighters would be waiting for them. And some of the missions could be 8, 10, 12 hours. At this point in the war, there were 10-man crews. Pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and engineer were officers, and the balance were enlisted men. They were highly trained, really highly trained. The thing that surprises people is, first of all, people don't realize that they aren't pressurized, and they think they're armored. And it's like 1/16 of an inch aluminum skin. That's the armor on them. And they're very noisy, extremely loud, and all the cables and pulleys and stuff are all exposed. And probably one of the most surprising things to people is how small they are. They think they're a large aircraft, and you think for 10 people, but it's a really cramped aircraft. Lots going on if you're in a combat situation. Cologne was one of the heaviest defended targets in Germany, especially in terms of flak guns, which was an 88 millimeter cannon that they had by the hundreds. And so in this mission, one of the 88s did a direct hit under the chin turret of the B-17, where Dad was ordinarily sitting in the bombardier's place, and blew up George Abbott, who was KIA in that mission. And Dad was knocked unconscious and back against the firewall. When he regained consciousness, he's outdoors, at 30,000 feet. They just did bombs away, so the bomb bay doors were still open, so you had the wind coming in the nose and then out the bomb bay doors, and the aircraft was a giant whistle. All the instruments were gone, with the exception of the compass, and they didn't know how reliable that was. And the nose was blown back and curled over part of the windshield, so he had to fly, like looking out to the side of the car. They decided, it was still flyable to at least head for the channel and get off the continent and ditch out there. They lost all the charts, but they had 2 P-51 Mustangs, saw that they were crippled because they had dropped out of altitude, and the 2 P-51s came and lined them up. Of course, they knew they just left Cologne and where the Rhine was, and Dad, he would give them bearings, which is one thing to do that on land, but you get out over water, there's not a lot of landmarks out there. Dad gave them the bearings, hit the coast of England, and were supposed to, and directly into their base. The brakes were fading, he said, and he had to run it off the end of the runway because there was 4 more squadrons coming in behind him, and he didn't want to be blocking the runway. Dad says some of the crew was out before the aircraft even stopped. Dad got out of the infirmary. 3 days later, they're flying another mission. And the first mission was Mersburg, which was the heaviest defended target in all of Europe. And then the day after that, back to Cologne again. I was able to talk to most of the crew members because you didn't get that stuff from Dad. Like most of the guys, they didn't talk about it. They just wanted to get home. He did 31 of the 35 missions. When he left at Hampstead, which is Station 131. That was their base. Then he went and he was training bombardiers and navigators for the balance of the war before he got enough points to go home. George Abbott, who was the Togolier who was KIA on that mission, my folks named me after him. And I keep in contact with his family.